Our next reading comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 29, verses 15 through 28. Laban said to Jacob, Laban said to Jacob, just because you are a kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder one was Leah. The name of the younger one was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes. Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel. So he answered, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, better I should give her to you than I should give her to an outsider. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is fulfilled, that I may cohabit with her. And Laban gathered all the people of the place and made a feast. When the evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him. And he cohabited with her. Laban had given his maidservant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her maid. When morning came, there was Leah. So he said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? Laban said, it's not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the older. Wait until the bridal week of this one is over, and we will give you that one too, provided you serve me another 7 years. Jacob did so. He waited out the bridal week of the one, then he gave him his daughter Rachel as a wife. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, that was a dirty story to read in church, wasn't it? All right, there's a lot that's going on. It's dirty there. Not just the marital relations either. What Laban did to Jacob, that was dirty. Of course, Jacob did have it coming because of the dirty stuff he did to his brother Esau. What is this you've done to me? I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? I bet that's a question Jacob's heard before. Sounds like something some others might have asked him along the way. Now, from the start of this story, looking back with that hindsight 2020 vision, from the start of this story, Laban was obviously scheming. A month in, Jacob had been with them. Jacob was obviously head over heels for Rachel. And then Laban makes the offer. Let me make you an offer you can't refuse. You're my family, and you're here serving. You shouldn't do that for nothing, right? Well, we're family. I'll make you a deal, but, we got to work something out, right? Work for me 7 years, and you've got Rachel. Now pause here for feeling disturbed about Rachel's life being property. Okay, continue. Jacob's like, it's a deal, no problem. And he worked that 7 years like it was nothing. And don't let it get lost on us, that number 7. 7 days of creation. It's a holy number. It represents completeness. And 7 years was no small commitment. And it was just the right amount of service to gain his perfect bride. Because of his deep love for Rachel, Jacob served those 7 years with his arms tied behind his back. It was no problem. Felt like but a few days. But then we find out Laban's scheme. Not that he was really bad or evil or just doing awful things so much. Laban was just as tricky and deceptive as the young Padawan Jacob. Probably even more so. Laban had a few more years of practice. And Laban got him pretty good on this one, you got to admit. Oh, man. Jacob's eyes were totally fixed on Rachel. Laban read it from a mile away. And Jacob here, his unwavering personality, all that fighting for first place, deceiving Esau for the birthright, downright stealing Esau's blessing with his mom's help, of course. But when Jacob sets his eyes on something, there is no stopping him. And I know Laban saw that a mile away in his love for Rachel. Jacob's love for Rachel was unwavering. Now, you may very well have missed it because we didn't actually read it today. We start at verse 15, back in verse 10, leading into this. Jacob meets Rachel at a well. All right, and just by this well showing up and him looking for his bride, you know something big is going to happen. A big connection is about to take place. Remember Rebekah meeting Abraham's servant at the well for Isaac. Remember Moses meeting Zipporah, happens later in Exodus. They met at a well. Remember Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well. Sure, that wasn't the romantic relationship, but still it was this very strong personal connection. To me, it's kind of like Coming to America. You remember that movie? It was the 1990s Eddie Murphy movie. When the barber tells the guys, well, you can't go to bars and clubs to go meet a good woman. You got to go to a good place, a nice place. Go to a library. Go to a church. Well, in Jacob's time, a really good place to meet a really good woman was a well. Jacob, on his journey, had his eyes raised, approaching this well. He wasn't in Queens. He found his way to Haran, this special place where he was to find his bride. And as soon as he encounters that well, we know something big is about to happen. And then, the story is great, and it's just little small bits in the story, but there's this big old rock covering the mouth of the well. And it wasn't moved yet. The shepherds worked together to move it when all the flock's together. Well, when Jacob first sees Rachel, he lifts that big old rock all by himself, moves it to the side, showing that superhuman strength that he had at the first sight of his love, Rachel. Now, ladies, I am looking to hear some stories about what kind of boulders your loves have lifted to impress you over the years. Well, Jacob lifted that big old rock in front of the well with no problem. And that is unwavering commitment for you. Now, although without a clue of the boulders that lie ahead. That magical moment came and went, and the real fun began. How unwavering will Jacob be really when it comes down to it? He works those first 7 years. He gets his wife. The next morning he realizes what happened, and it's Leah. He's like, what happened? What is this you've done to me? He was caught totally off guard. I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you deceive me? Now, Laban didn't mean him any harm so much. It was really kind of messed up what he did to him. But his goal was to find Leah a husband. He cared about his daughter. At least that's his explanation. We can always kind of postulate that maybe his real effort was just to get those years of labor out of Jacob. But the reason he gives, it's all about his daughter. So we can't really fault him too much for it. We can sympathize somewhat with that. But still, that in itself creates this whole huge boulder for Jacob to carry. Jacob works the second 7 years for Rachel. And, he gets her after waiting the week, but then he has to work the 7 years for her. And through his unwavering faith, he goes forward with the deal and he completes that deal. But along with that, he gets Leah. Not that anything was wrong with Leah, it's just they didn't connect like he and Rachel did. And notice the vision, the description of eyes being something that tells us how Jacob felt. And there's a lot about eyes and vision. And Leah had weak eyes. Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Now, the Hebrew is a little ambiguous. It sounds like it's just saying Rachel was shapely and beautiful. I like to think that it's saying Rachel's eyes were shapely and beautiful because it's like this comparison with Leah. Don't quote me on that. That's just the direction I like to go with it. But Jacob's view of them speaks to how he felt of them. And Rachel was the one he couldn't take his eyes off of. Jacob and Leah are just kind of stuck together as husband and wife. Neither of them really asked for it. Leah needs a wife, but she wasn't asking for a husband that wasn't going to love her. Plus, it interferes with Jacob's and Rachel's relationship. Leah is stuck in this loveless marriage, but she ends up being able to have kids. Rachel has the better role in the family. She has Jacob's love, but she can't have kids. So now we've got a whole new problem of them getting into it even more. Continuing where Jacob and Esau left off. Family systems all over the place. It's messy. It's complicated. Do you know what? That's because life is messy and complicated. It's dirty. Not all of this stuff going on that we read about has anything to do with God's will. Just like today, people do what people will do in their situations. Sometimes trying to do the best, sometimes not. Often making the best decision possible for whatsoever reason. I think we find a lot of that, which complicates these biblical heroes' stories. In the midst of that mess and those complications, God is at work. God is in motion. God is behind the scenes speaking and doing, offering providence for everybody involved. We can train our eyes to see what God is doing. We can train our ears to hear God speaking, just like we can train ourselves to read the Bible and notice when God is saying something or when God has ordained something or when it's just people doing it. We can train our eyes and our ears to know the difference. And if we're honest with each other and with ourselves, we can say that our lives are messy. Our lives are complicated. Complicated family systems passed down from generation to generation. Complicated emotions from those fundamental relationships and how they went. Complicated situations because life is complicated and life just keeps happening. Life is not only this stunning gift from God, life is this force that keeps striving forward and pushing forward, making a way out of no way. Because life is something that comes from God. God finds a way through our complications. God keeps showing up and God keeps speaking to us. God keeps providing, God keeps protecting, and God keeps guiding. And God has given us an opportunity to exist in this whirlwind of creation and to fight for life. To fight, to claw and scratch, to struggle for every moment of life, even if it's just for one more moment. And with all its blessings and with all its messes and complications, God calls us not only to exist, but to live. To live the complications, to feel the roller coasters of ups and downs, to deal with those things that we sent out into the world and come back to haunt us later in life. One step at a time. If you're on a walker, that's a half step at a time. If you're on a wheelchair, that's one roll at a time. If you don't even have that, that's one scoot at a time. People all over God's creation are making do with what they've got, which in a lot of cases isn't much. And praising God for that. Full of life and joy. That speaks a lot of hope to me. It paints a very beautiful image of the future for me, of what's possible, of what God sees for us, what God's working on. Here in the United States, wherever else you are out there, where you lay your head at night, in these times of unrest over the pandemic, in these times of unrest over systematic racism, where is God? It's a good question to be asking. Where are we really seeing God's Spirit? Where are we really hearing God's voice. God's unwavering spirit of agape love, unconditional love. Where is it out there? Throughout Jacob's story of trickery and deception, he got back what he put in. Nothing was even said about God's action in that. Nevertheless, the universe God created worked itself out, and he got what he had coming to him. Take a look at the story today and I ask you, where is God? How well are your eyes trained to read the Scripture? Now, that is a tricky and deceptive question I just asked you. Dirty, if you will. God is not mentioned in any part of the passage we read today. And I pray you don't leave here feeling like I deceived you. I mean, we already know that God's with Jacob. We found that out last week in a vision on the Mount of the Lord at Bethel. A lot of us know the rest of the story already, and we can look back with 20/20 hindsight and know some different places where God's voice is speaking. And if you don't know the rest of the story, all you have to do is read ahead. And if anybody doesn't have Bibles out there, let us know. We will help you find one. Looking back, we know that God is in the background figuring out how to bring up 12 tribes of Israel out of Jacob, Leah and Rachel. And God's opening wombs and everything. God is doing some powerful stuff for life. God is unwaveringly working on life and blessing, no matter the hardships, no matter the struggles, no matter our dirty tricks, no matter our deceptions, no matter our messes, no matter our complications. God is unwaveringly working on life and blessing. And God has already shown us how to get on board with the work of the kingdom. God has already given us Jesus Christ. If you're lacking clear vision of what unwavering faith looks like, of the faith we're called to have, just take a look at Jesus. The superhuman power of divine love.